everybody, this is Miss Sebastian. This week we're going to read a story called The Open Window. It's by a man named Saki. It's on page 56 in your reading packet from school, or I will also upload a digital copy. This is about the author. This man is named Saki. He lived about 100 years ago. Actually, he died about 100 years ago, so he lived about almost 200 years ago, 150. Saki's real name was Hector Hugh Monroe. He was born in the Asian country of Burma, now called Myanmar. When he was a toddler, his mom was killed by a charging cow. His father sent Saki and his older brother and sister to live with relatives in England. So they were originally from Asia, but after his mom died, they went to live with his family in England. They were raised by their grandmother and two very strict aunts. Strict means they have lots and lots of rules. The aunts had many rules. Saki didn't like the rules, but he had to obey. That means he had to follow them. He was not allowed to play outside very often. The windows in his house were never even opened. Saki rebelled against this strictness when he grew older. He wrote many short stories about clever youths, that means smart kids, who trick the mean people in their lives. A lot of his tales have surprise endings. Fortunately for Saki, his stories were popular and brought him fame and a good income. That means because his stories were really popular, he was able to sell them to make them into books, so he got some good money from that. So now we're going to start the story. Now this is a fiction story, which means it's not true. My aunt will be down soon, Mr. Nuttall, said the confident 15-year-old young lady. Frampton Nuttall started to think of something to talk about with the girl. He also wondered what he would say to his aunt. At his sister's recommendation, he had come to their home in the country to rest and cure his nerves. But he doubted whether this visit with total strangers was going to help him. So this man named Frampton went to go visit his relatives in the country because he was sick. When it says his nerves were bad, that's an old-time thing for just saying he was sick. But he was wondering if these people could help him because he doesn't know his relatives very well. That's why he calls them strangers. I know how it will be, his sister had said before he left for the country. You won't speak to anyone down there. Your nerves will be worse than ever for moping. So I'll give you letters of introduction to all the people I know. Some of them are quite nice. So his sister was going to give him some notes so he could get to know some people. Frampton wondered whether Mrs. Stapleton, the girl's aunt, was one of the nice people. Do you know many of the people here? Asked the niece. She thought that they had been silent long enough. So let's move on to the next page. So that was page 58. So on that page, tragedy is a very sad event. Confident means you're really sure of yourself. Nerves means worried and scared feeling. And doubt means you're not sure about something. So let's go to the next page, which is page 59. So he's sitting in the living room and they're waiting for his aunt. And the niece says if he knows anybody. So Frampton answers, hardly anybody. My sister stayed here 4 years ago. She gave me letters of introduction to some of the people she met. He said the last sentence unhappily. Then you don't even know about my aunt? Continued the silver-shirt young lady. Only her name and address, he admitted. He wondered whether Mrs. Stapleton was married or widowed. Something about the room made him think she was married. So basically, Frampton is waiting to meet his aunt because she didn't come into the room yet, and he's wondering if she's married or widowed. Widowed means her husband died. And then the niece is answering now. Her great tragedy happened 3 years ago, said the niece. That would have been after your sister was here. Her tragedy, said Frampton. Remember, tragedy means a very sad event. Her tragedy? Asked Frampton. It was hard to imagine tragedies in this restful place of the country. You may wonder why we keep that window wide open on October afternoons, said the niece. She pointed out a large French window that opened into the lawn. It is quite warm today, said Frampton, but what does that window have to do with her tragedy? On this day, 3 years ago, her husband, her 2 young brothers, and their little brown dog left through that window to go hunting. They never came back. On the way to their favorite hunting spot, they all drowned. It had been a very wet winter. Places that used to be safe to walk across were not safe. The marsh gave way suddenly without warning. Their bodies were never recovered. That was the dreadful part of it. So, in this one we can see the marsh gave way, which means the ground fell under them, and dreadful means horrible. So this niece is talking about her mom, and she's saying that her husband and 2 little brothers went hunting, and they had an accident, and they never came back. So that's what the niece is talking about. So that's why the window's open, just as if they were waiting for them to come back from hunting. So we're going to turn the page now. Now we're on page 60. So other words here are bound, means run, leap, or jump. An unfortunate coincidence means unlucky. So now we're at the top of page 60. Now the girl's voice softened. Poor Aunt always thinks that they will come back someday. She believes they will walk in that window just as they used to do. That is why the window is kept open every evening until the sun goes down. So the girl is saying they leave the window open because her mom thinks that the people are going to come back, but they really don't. So she's basically saying her mom's a little bit crazy because the people are actually dead. She said, my poor aunt often talks about how her husband went out that day with his white raincoat over his arm, and her youngest brother was saying, Bertie, why do you bound? To annoy her. Do you know, sometimes on quiet evenings like this, I almost get a creepy feeling that they will walk through the window. She stopped with a little shudder. It was a relief to Frampton when the aunt hurried into the room apologizing for being late. I hope Vera has been amusing you, she said. She has been very interesting, said Frampton. I hope you don't mind the open window, said Mrs. Sableton. My husband and brothers will be home soon. They always come in that way. They've been out hunting today. They will make a muddy mess over my poor carpets. So like you men, isn't it? She continued talking about hunting and birds and ducks, but to Frampton it was purely horrible. He tried to change the subject, but his hostess was only partially paying attention to him. Her eyes were looking past him to the open window. It was certainly an unfortunate coincidence that his visit was on the day of this tragic anniversary. So, Frampton thinks this lady's crazy because she keeps looking through the window to wait for her husband and brothers to come back from hunting, and then the niece had told her that they're dead, but the lady's acting like as if they're alive. So let's look up here. We're on the next page, page 61. The doctors agree that I need complete rest. I also need to avoid anything that might excite me too much. I cannot do difficult exercise, announced Frampton. He mistakenly thought total strangers would be interested in his medical problems. But the doctors do not agree about my diet. No, said Mrs. Sableton, in a voice that could only replace with a yawn at the last moment. Yawning is when you open up your mouth when you're sleepy and you make that sound like, like that. That's a yawn. So basically, she doesn't really care about this kid, and she's just excited for her husband to come back from hunting. Then she suddenly brightened up, but not at what Frampton was saying. Here they are at last, she cried, just in time for tea. They look as if they are muddy up to their eyes. Frampton shivered slightly and turned toward the niece with a sympathetic look. The child was staring out through the open window with horror in her eyes. In cold shock, Frampton swung around in his seat and looked in the same direction. So, all of a sudden, the lady sees her husband and brothers, but Frampton's confused because he was told that they're dead, so now he's freaking out. Maybe there's ghosts or something. So, next page is page 62. Three figures were walking across the lawn towards the window. They all carried guns under their arms. One of them was wearing a white coat. A tired brown spaniel was at their heels. That's a dog, a brown spaniel. Noiselessly, they walked toward the house. The hoarse young voice sang out, I said, Bertie, why do you bound? So here's these people coming towards through the window, and Frampton thinks they're ghosts. So Frampton grabbed wildly for his stick and hat. He ran out the door, down the gravel road, through the front gate. A bicyclist on the road drove into the bushes to avoid hitting me. So Frampton runs out of the house and never comes back again because he thinks there's ghosts coming into through the window. So back into the room, we see the man is talking now. "Here we are, my dear," said the man in the white raincoat, coming in through the window. "We're fairly muddy, but most of it's dry." "Who was that who rushed out as we came up?" "A very unusual man," said Mrs. Stapleton. "He could only talk about his illnesses. He rushed off without a word when you arrived. It was as if he had seen a ghost." So, turns out that the niece was just playing a big joke on Frampton. She told us a lie about her dad and brothers and uncles being dead, but really they were really out hunting, and so they really did come back. They were real people, but the kid Frampton thought they were ghosts, so he ran away because he was scared. Okay, next page, 63. "It must have been the spaniel," said the niece calmly. "He told me he was terrified of dogs. A pack of wild dogs once chased him into a cemetery, and he had to spend the night in a newly dug grave with the creature snarling above him. That would be enough to make everyone frightened." Wild tales at short notice were her specialty. So it turns out that this whole time, this girl, the niece, made up this story saying that these guys were dead, and so when Frampton saw them, he thought they were ghosts, but they really weren't. She was just playing a bad, mean trick on him. Thank you.